One of the most common problems in fish keeping is spotting a beautiful new fish at the store only to realize you don't actually have a tank ready for it. That's exactly what happened to me when I came across this stunning male betta. And like any other responsible adult, I handled the situation the only way I knew how, by setting up another tank. Chapter 1. The Build. Since bettas have a lot of personality and love to explore, I wanted to create a thriving ecosystem where mine could interact with other creatures and enjoy a dynamic environment. And to make that happen, I had to start from the ground up. For the substrate, I began with a layer of old aqua soil to add height, followed by organic potting soil to provide essential nutrients for the plants. Finally, I capped it all off with sand to keep everything locked in place. Once the substrate was finished, I moved on to the hardscape. As always, I experimented with a few different layouts till I found one I liked. Once I got the wood in the way I liked, I added lava stones to support the wooden structure and also weigh down the wood so that it wouldn't float once the water was added. To lock everything in place, I secured it with superglue. With the hardscape completed, it was time to move on to planting. Chapter 2. The Planting. I made a couple mistakes during the process, the first being adding an Amazon sword before I fully realized how big they can get. The second mistake was thinking I had two different types of dwarf Sagittaria, only to find out that they were the same plant, just grown under different conditions, meaning they would grow the same way. You'll see what I mean later. I also added some tiger lotus pups that needed a larger space to continue growing out. On top of that, I also added some Bacopa monnieri for some height in the background. Afterward, I added the water and turned on the filter to allow for everything to begin to settle. With everything all set up, I decided it would be a good time to move the tank to its final position. It would sit on our kitchen counter for all to see. The plants all started quite small and would take some time to grow, but it's an investment I'm willing to make. And I have to say, there is something so satisfying about watching a tank fill in. Once all the aquatic plants were in, I decided to add some immersed plants and top off the water. I also decided to add some floating plants to help buffer the aquarium and add some beneficial bacteria. Chapter 3. Adding life. With all the plants in place, it was time to introduce the first inhabitants of the tank, the humble cleanup crew. The first creatures to be added were cherry shrimp. These small but beautiful creatures would be perfect for cleaning any uneaten food and foraging through the debris in the tank. I also added some ram's horn snails as they're good for cleaning the glass and the food left over. I also think they graze like cattle and they're quite entertaining to watch. The final creature I added was a garden worm. They can actually survive underwater. If the water has enough oxygen in it, they should be completely fine. At first, I wasn't sure how they'd all do with the betta, especially if you saw my previous betta tank video, but only time would tell. At this point, I decided the tank could use one final touch. So I siphoned out the necessary water and removed any debris that I could in the process. Since I had plenty of Java moss on hand, I used it to add some character to the driftwood. As always, I used superglue to help lock it in place. I really liked how it was coming together, creating that real, natural, and wild look in the tank. It would also create a place for baby shrimp and snails to hide, so it was worth taking the time to help the populations flourish. Chapter 4. The King. Up until now, the betta I had been building this tank for was living in my community tank, transitioning from life in a tiny cup to chasing the guppies that shared his space. But at last, it was time to introduce him to his new kingdom. Each betta is unique, not just a beautiful fish, but one with a distinct personality. This guy in particular seemed to enjoy a bit of thrill, repeatedly swimming into the current and riding it down the length of the tank. As much as he seemed to enjoy it, I decided to turn the flow down just to make sure he didn't have to work too hard and become stressed, especially because bettas prefer calmer waters. Chapter 5. The Kingdom. Once the king settled into his new home, he truly began to show his vibrant colors, exploring his kingdom and meeting his subjects. Bettas naturally change colors throughout their lives, so you may notice subtle shifts in his hues throughout the shots. The plants inside the tank continued growing and filling out. And the Amazon sword did what they do best: grow. I would occasionally clean the glass on the tank so that I could still peer into this small but magical kingdom. Much to my surprise, the subjects in this kingdom actually lasted and their numbers steadily grew. Bettas can be cruel rulers, but this one seemed to not be as bad, but rather interacted with his subjects as a good king would. From an empty tank to a thriving jungle, this Betta's kingdom truly came to life. Watching everything grow and come together was an amazing journey. If you enjoyed this build, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. I have plenty of new projects coming your way that you don't want to miss.